images you never escape, not even at the very end of your life. They don't just scar your memory, they change the rhythm of your heart forever. That morning, I saw one of those images. And I swear, if you carry even a shred of compassion, you wouldn't sleep easily after witnessing it. My name is Samuel Grant. I'm 67 years old, a veteran, living alone on the outskirts of Asheville, North Carolina. Since my wife, Clara, passed, the house has known nothing but the cold ticking of the wall clock. Each morning I'd take my fishing rod and walk to the creek north of town, as if casting a line could keep my mind from sinking deeper into the pit of loneliness. I thought that morning would be no different. But God had other plans. He meant for me to find my own heart again, in the fragile body of a filthy, abandoned creature at the very edge of the trash heap. That creek was unnervingly still. The sky hung heavy and gray, a damp smell clinging to the air. Right away, I noticed. No birds, no insects, not even a whisper of wind through the branches. Only the sluggish trickle of water mixed with the sour stench of garbage piled along the bank. Then it came, a faint sound breaking through the silence, a rustle, as if something small was clawing under the wet refuse. I slowed my steps, my hand tightening around the rod as though it were a weapon. My heart pounded. War had taught me that strange sounds often meant danger. I pushed aside a mound of torn plastic bags and froze. There, among rotting fish bones and shredded trash, a Doberman puppy barely a month old trembled. He was so tiny he could fit in my two hands. His black coat, meant to shine with brown markings, was matted and greasy with mud and oil. His ribs stuck out. His chest rose and fell with such effort that every breath looked like a battle. But it wasn't his frailty that crushed my heart. It was his eyes. They were clouded over, dull and white, like shattered glass covered in dust. No spark, no glimmer left. I knew instantly. He was nearly blind. Lord have mercy. A pup that small, blind, dumped in a garbage pit, gnawing on a stiff fish carcass just to stay alive. My throat closed. I stepped closer and whispered, "Hey, baby, I'm right here." He didn't lift his head. He didn't respond. He just shivered, jaws locked tight around that shard of bone, as if it were the only thing anchoring him to this world. And in that moment I saw again the eyes of young soldiers I'd once held on battlefields, eyes that knew no one was coming. I dropped to my knees. The stench of sour fish, burnt plastic, and sewage clawed at me, making my stomach lurch. But none of it mattered compared to what I saw before me. A living soul, cast off by the world, unable even to look for help, clinging to survival through refuse. My chest tightened, my hands shook. I knew without question, if I walked away, it would be his death sentence. I could not let that happen. Not again. Not after all I had already witnessed in this life. I drew a long breath as if sealing a vow. Reaching my hand toward him, my voice broke into a near sob. "Don't be afraid. This time, someone isn't going to leave you behind." I was still kneeling in the trash, my hand hovering less than a foot above that tiny body. And then it hit me. A different sound, heavy and low, cutting through the damp air. The growl of an engine. I turned my head. On the dirt road leading into the dump, a garbage truck was backing in. Its tires crunched over gravel with a sickening grind, the rear lights glowing red against the creek's dark water, and the path it was taking led straight toward me and the puppy. Dear God. The words broke from my lips as I shot to my feet. The pup had no idea. His cloudy eyes saw nothing but permanent night. He just trembled, jaws clamped on that piece of rotten fish as if it were the last thread holding him here. My voice tore out, raw and hoarse. "Stop! There's a dog here.
but the roar of the engine drowned me out. The driver couldn't hear a thing. The truck kept backing, closer and closer, now only a few dozen steps away. And in my mind came another sound, the screams of my brothers years ago when a helicopter was seconds too late, when a wounded soldier slipped away right before our eyes. I knew then I would not let that scene replay, not ever again. Without a heartbeat's hesitation, I lunged forward. My hands scooped the pup up from the slimy heap. He startled, legs flailing weakly in the air, but he didn't cry. His whole body weighed no more than a soaked rag, ice cold, the stench of rot clinging to my sleeve. I felt his heart racing, faint, pressed hard against my chest. The truck was less than 30 feet away. I spun, my boot slipping on torn plastic bags, nearly sending us both crashing down. But I held on, clutching him tight, and ran with everything I had across the dump. Behind me, tires crushed the bags I had just cleared, bursting with a heavy whump only steps away. I screamed from my throat, yet whispered to the fragile life trembling in my arms, "Hold on to me. I won't let you disappear under those wheels, not while I'm still breathing." At last, I stumbled clear of the truck's path, gasping, my legs shaking. I collapsed onto the damp ground, cradling the pup against me. He didn't struggle, just shivered, his small chest pumping fast. My hand brushed his belly, and I froze. It was swollen hard, like a stone. Not from fullness, but from something wrong, something crushing what little life remained. Tears welled in my eyes, burning my throat. I remembered those slips of paper in the field hospital. Young men marked down as, "Won't make it through the night." But this time it wasn't written by a doctor or by some invisible bullet. It was carved right here, in the bloated stomach of an abandoned pup. I bent closer, holding him tighter. He couldn't see my face, but I wanted him to hear me, the rhythm of my heart, the steadiness of my breath, so he would know he wasn't alone. I whispered, "Listen, kid, I've lost too much in my life. I can't lose you too. You're not going to die here. I swear it." I wrapped my jacket around his frail body and lifted him up. The truck was still rumbling behind us, trash spilling to the ground, but in my mind, it all faded away. All that remained was the weak beat pressed to my chest. I rose and walked fast toward my old pickup parked at the edge of the woods. Every step was heavy, but inside me burned a fierce resolve I hadn't felt in years. The same fire that once pushed me through smoke and gunfire to save a life. I set him gently on the passenger seat, pulled the belt across his body to hold him, then shut the door. And in that moment, I knew I had crossed the point of no return. From this day on, his life was bound to mine, and if anyone had ever thought he wasn't worth saving, they were dead wrong. I jumped into the truck and turned the key. The old pickup coughed, then roared to life, as if it knew it carried an urgent mission. Rain began to fall, light at first, then heavier, each drop striking the windshield and blurring the world into streaks of water. On the passenger seat, the little Doberman pup was wrapped in my faded army jacket. His body shook without pause, breath rasping, sometimes rapid, sometimes breaking off in silence. Every tiny gasp that shuddered out of his chest cut straight into mine like a blade. I drove on, whispering as if in prayer, "Come on, kid. Don't leave me on this road. I didn't turn away, and you can't give up. You hear me?" A red light ahead. A line of cars blocked the way. I slapped the wheel, my heart hammering like a drum. Horns blared behind me. I glanced at him, his cloudy eyes still half shut, his belly swollen beneath the jacket. I imagined what a delay of just a few minutes might cost him. A decision snapped inside me. I flipped on the hazards and swerved onto the emergency lane,
Tires screeched on the wet pavement. People shouted, cursed, but I heard nothing. Only one truth mattered. Every passing second might be his last. We tore through the small streets of Asheville. Houses streaked by the windows, grocery signs, the familiar old gas station, all blurred like a film running too fast. In my mind, there was only one destination. The clinic of Dr. Megan Rhodes, my old comrade, the one who once patched up K9s beside me in the war zone. If anyone could give this pup a chance, it was Megan. Suddenly, the skies split open. Rain hammered down, wipers whipping back and forth, but the road stayed smeared and gray. My chest clenched when I heard his faint whimper. I reached across, pressing my palm to his rock-hard belly. Beneath the skin, his heartbeat thudded weakly, irregular. I swallowed hard, whispering a vow. Listen to me, kid. You're not trash. You're not disposable. I swear, no one decides your last day except you and God. The truck veered hard onto the dirt road leading into the old town. Mud sprang out from the tires. I remembered that weathered green sign with its fading white letters. Veterinary Clinic. Dr. Megan Rhodes, if I could just make it there. Then the car ahead slammed its brakes. I stomped my own pedal. The pickup jolted violently, nearly tossing the pup from the seat. I lunged, clutching him tight, hearing that frail whine like a thread snapping. I shouted into the rain-filled air, "Don't leave me! Not after everything you've endured." The downpour hammered the glass. But when I lifted my head, I saw it. The dim neon glow I knew so well, flickering behind the old gas station. Megan's clinic. My chest seized, my heart threatening to break through my ribs. I floored the gas, the engine shrieking as we lunged for the final stretch. I braked hard in front of the door, tires screaming, leaving black streaks through the water. I threw the door open, cradled him against me, and ran inside. The bell over the door chimed. White fluorescent light poured down, and there was Megan, lifting her head from a stack of files. Her eyes widened at what I carried, a drenched Doberman pup, belly grotesquely swollen, eyes clouded pale as fog. My voice cracked, breath ragged. "Megan, save him. If you don't, he won't make it." She didn't ask questions, just nodded, her voice steady and commanding, the same as in those field tents years ago. "Put him on the table right now, Sam. We don't have a second to lose." And in that moment, I knew the real battle had just begun. Megan pulled on a pair of white rubber gloves, her voice firm, though her eyes never left the tiny body I had placed on the cold steel table. The room blazed under the fluorescent lights, filled with the sting of disinfectant, the smell of new gloves, the metallic chill of steel. All of it pulled me back into the memories of those battlefield surgical tents years ago. I stood close to the table, my heart racing out of control, my eyes locked on the little Doberman. He lay curled tight, his clouded eyes barely open, his breaths thinner than thread. That swollen belly pushed up beneath his wet fur, like a heavy ball crushing every organ inside his small frame. Megan pressed gently with 2 fingers. Her eyes softened with worry. "Sam," she whispered, "there's a solid mass in his abdomen, hard as stone. It isn't food. It could be an infected abscess or a cyst. If we don't operate, it'll press on the liver, the stomach, even the heart." I swallowed hard. "Does he have a chance?" Megan lifted her gaze, meeting mine with the same honesty she once gave me whenever bad news came down in the army. "His odds are razor thin. He's so weak. The anesthesia itself might kill him before we even touch a scalpel. But if we don't try, Sam..." She didn't finish. She just looked down at those blind eyes. My throat tightened.
Faces of young men I'd lost flashed back, but this time it wasn't a soldier. It was a fragile life that had never even seen the light. My voice came out rough, almost broken. "We're not giving up." Not this time, Megan nodded, that familiar nod from long ago, the one she gave when others stepped back and we stepped forward. "All right. Prep the OR." The room transformed in an instant. Nurses rushed for instruments. Metal trays clanged. The monitor crackled to life, beeping slow, steady, each sound carved into me. Megan slipped on her mask, her eyes lit with both determination and fear. I bent low, my trembling hand resting on the pup's head. I whispered, "Listen, kid. I pulled you out of that dump, and I'll pull you through this. You don't get to leave me, you hear?" The nurse lowered a tiny mask over his muzzle. I held my breath. A needle slid into the frail vein of his front leg. The monitor flickered, the heartbeat slowing, evening out. Sweat broke across my temples. Megan drew the scalpel. The halogen lamp flooded his belly with harsh light. I couldn't stay any longer. Rules didn't allow it, and Megan's voice came deep and steady. "Sam, you can't be in here." "I'll send word as soon as there's progress." I nodded and backed into the hallway. The door swung shut, leaving me with an old wooden chair and the faint, distant beeping of the monitor. I sat, my hands clasped so tight they turned white. Every beep struck like a drumbeat, like the counting down of time. Minutes stretched into eternity. I stared at the wall clock, its second hand creeping like mockery. Rain hammered the tin roof, merging with the steady beep inside. I bit my lip, closed my eyes, and whispered a prayer I hadn't dared to speak in years. "God, don't take him. Don't make me watch another loss." Suddenly, a sound split the air, a long, flat tone. Beep. My body shot upright, my heart crashing against my ribs. That sound dragged me back to the battlefield, where it always meant the end. But then, beep, beep. The rhythm returned, faint but alive. My knees buckled, and I collapsed back into the chair, hands covering my face as tears spilled, relief and pain mixing into one. The door cracked open. A nurse with blonde hair tied back leaned out, her voice small but urgent. "Blood pressure's stable. Dr. Rhodes is removing the abscess." The door closed. My head dropped into my hands, my heart thundering. Every minute dragged like an hour. Then, at last, the door swung wide. Megan stepped out, pulling her mask down, sweat glistening on her brow, her eyes rimmed red. She stripped off her gloves, her voice hoarse but steady. "We removed a massive abscess, the size of an orange." The infection had started spreading, but it hadn't reached the liver. I flushed the cavity, sutured him, and started direct antibiotics. As for his eyes, the right is completely gone, but the left, if we fight for it, there's a chance he may keep a sliver of sight. I collapsed back onto the chair, tears rolling freely. Every muscle in me, tight as wire, finally gave way. I looked up at her, my voice a whisper. "As long as there's a chance, that's enough to fight for." Megan nodded. "Then right now, Sam, the rest is up to him. He has to choose to live." I rose, wiped the tears from my face, and answered with a voice stronger than I thought I still had. "He won't fight alone." The recovery room of the little clinic was small but blazing with white light. I sat on an old plastic chair, my eyes fixed on the fragile body lying on a pale green pad. A white line of stitches stretched across his belly, from his ribs down, like a battlefield wound held together only by a miracle. The monitor beside him ticked out a steady beep. Beep. But every time it sounded, I flinched, terrified it might stretch into that long, merciless beep that had haunted me all my life. Shadow. That was the name I had whispered to him the moment I carried him against my chest. Lay motionless. His clouded eyes stayed half shut, his chest rising in faint, shallow breaths. I reached out and touched his head lightly. His fur was still cold, but life remained. I sat for hours, reading aloud to him. Not so he could understand, but so he could feel my presence. I opened Clara's old Bible, my voice trembling as I read the passages she used to read to me on the nights I came back from war. He will never abandon the weak. Maybe he didn't understand a word, but his tiny ears twitched, and I believed that somewhere deep in that fragile mind, he knew someone was here for him. On the second day, he still hadn't moved. I brought a small container of chicken broth I had simmered that morning. I dipped a spoon, cooled it, and held it near his muzzle. Nothing. No reaction. I sat there for an hour, the spoon trembling in my hand, but never pulling away. I just whispered, "If you can hear me, just give me a sign." Any sign at all. Nothing. Only the mechanical beeping and the rain tapping against the window. On the third day, when I repeated the ritual, something strange happened. I held the spoon close and his tiny nostrils fluttered. A longer breath. Then, his tongue slipped out, trembling, and licked a drop. Just once, weak as a leaf shivering in the wind. I froze. Then the tears came, hot and unstoppable. Not loud sobs, just a silent flood down my cheeks. I whispered, my voice breaking. "Good boy. You heard me. You've chosen to live." When I looked up, I saw Megan standing in the doorway, her own eyes rimmed red. She nodded gently. "Sam, you just did something medicine can't. You gave him a reason to come back. From that day on, I came to the clinic from dawn till night. I brought books, my old clothes to lay beside him so he'd know my scent. I read, I hummed, or simply sat in silence. The room carried only the sound of my breathing and his fragile heartbeat. On the fifth day, as I opened the door, his ears flicked before I even reached him. He recognized my footsteps. I sat, held out the spoon of broth. This time, he licked it at once. Once. Twice. When I offered a little thin porridge, he tried to swallow it bit by bit. Megan stood behind me, her voice low but warm. If he can manage a few mouthfuls like this, several times a day, his chances will grow. I looked at him. His clouded eyes hadn't opened wide yet, but his tail gave the slightest twitch, as if trying to wag. I bent close, my lips trembling as I whispered, "No one has the right to say you don't deserve to live. Only you can choose. And today, you've chosen." That afternoon, for the first time in days, I stepped into the hallway without my heart weighed down like before. I knew the road ahead would still be long, full of painful surgeries and battles, but the seed of life had been planted, and that seed had just sprouted in my very hands. Fan Sao. After a week, Shadow's belly finally began to settle. The incision had dried, his heartbeat was steadier, and he could swallow spoonfuls of thin porridge. But his eyes, they remained the haunting weight in my chest. Every time I looked into those clouded, milk-white orbs, it felt like something tightened around my heart. Megan checked him again and again. Then one afternoon she sat beside me, her voice slow, measured. "Sam, we have to be honest. His right eye is gone. completely, beyond saving. But the left, there's a glimmer of hope. If we remove the damaged tissue, clean the cornea, maybe, just maybe, he could keep a trace of sight. But the risk is high. He's still so weak I stayed quiet, my hand stroking the little head resting on my lap. Shadow couldn't see me, but his ears twitched as if listening. I bent low, whispering, "You hear that, kid? I can't promise you the whole world back, but just one eye, so you can see the sun and see me. I'll fight alongside you." Megan placed her hand on my shoulder and nodded. "All right. Tomorrow we'll operate." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the bench in the clinic hallway, listening to Shadow's faint breathing from the recovery room. The dim, yellow light against the walls reminded me of nights waiting outside surgeries in the war zone when a brother's life balanced on the edge of a blade. But this time, it was a puppy, not yet a month old, and my heart trembled harder than it ever did in battle. The next morning, the surgery began. They placed Shadow on the small table, his thin legs bound gently with soft ties. I stood at his side, resting my hand on his head as the mask slipped over his muzzle. I whispered one last time before the darkness took him, "Don't leave me, Shadow. One eye is enough to see that I'm right here." The door closed. I was forced back out. In the silent hall, the faint monitor pulsed like a drumbeat. I paced, hands clenched so tight the veins stood out. In my mind, I heard every imagined sound, the scalpel, the clink of metal instruments. Then, suddenly, a long, flat tone split the air. Beep. I froze, ice flooding my veins, but a few seconds later, it steadied again. Beep. Beep. I collapsed into the chair, sweat soaking my back. Each minute dragged like a lifetime. I thought of Clara. I remembered her words. "Sam, sometimes the smallest ray of light is enough to chase away the dark." I bit my lip and prayed she was somewhere near, watching over this fight. At last, the door swung open. Megan stepped out, pulling down her mask, sweat glistening at her temple. Her eyes were rimmed red but steady. I rushed forward, my voice shaking. "How is he?" He's still alive?" She nodded. "He's alive." We had to remove the right eye completely. The cornea was dead, but the left, we saved it. If recovery goes well, he'll see a little. Not perfectly, but enough to glimpse this world. I dropped my head against the wall, tears streaming. Pain and gratitude twisted inside me all at once. I whispered, barely breathing, "Dear God, thank you. Even one eye is a universe to him." When they let me in, Shadow lay motionless under a thin blanket, one eye wrapped in a white bandage, the other closed. I sat beside him, took his cold little paw in my hand, and murmured, "Listen, kid, you've lost so much, but you still have one eye to see me, to see the sunlight, to see the grass, and I promise I'll show you every beautiful thing left in this world." His chest rose and fell weakly, but then his paw twitched faintly in my hand. That tiny movement was like a nod, and my heart cracked wide open. I bent down, whispering through tears, "Good boy. We made it through another battle." The days after Shadow's eye surgery passed slowly. I came to the clinic at dawn, sitting beside the small bed where he lay, one eye wrapped in a white bandage. Every faint breath stretched my heart tight. I knew the battle was not over. On the third day, Megan removed the bandage for the first time. The room fell into silence. I held my breath as she peeled away the last layer of gauze, revealing the eye that remained. It opened so slowly. I saw only a pale, cloudy brown, the eyeball trembling. Then, the pupil tightened as it caught the light from the window. My chest seized. "Sam," Megan whispered. "He can see light." Not clearly, but he can see it. I dropped to my knees beside him, tears falling onto the tile floor. Shadow lifted his head weakly, his ears twitching. I held out my hand before him, my fingers trembling, and I saw it. The small eye shifted, following the shadow of my hand. "Good boy," I choked out. "You see me now." "I'm right here, kid." He didn't bark. He just wagged his tail, the faintest movement. But that fragile wag was enough to split my chest wide open. All the nights of prayer, all the tears held back, broke free in that single moment. In the days that followed, his strength returned faster than I dared hope. He began to sit up, then try standing on wobbly legs. Every step across the recovery room felt like a miracle. I stayed at his side, my hand always ready so he'd feel there was something to lean on. One afternoon, Megan said, "Sam, it's time. He needs to go outside, to feel the sunlight with the eye he has left." I carried him out to the small yard behind the clinic. The Asheville sky was clear and blue that day, golden sunlight spilling across the wet grass. I set Shadow down. He wobbled for a moment, then lifted his head. His one good eye squinted, catching a ray of light. And I saw it. Not just sunlight, but life returning. He stepped forward slowly, sniffing the grass, the soil. His tail wagged harder. Then suddenly, he ran. Only a few yards, but enough to make me collapse into tears. A puppy once thrown away like trash, nearly blind, belly swollen like a death sentence, now running in the sun. I dropped to my knees, arms wide. He barreled into me, his head pressing into my chest, his breath fast but warm. I held him tight, tears soaking into his small head. "Welcome home, Shadow. You've come back from the dead. And you, little one, you were absolutely worth saving." That day I took him home. In my small living room, I hung a new frame on the wall, Shadow standing in sunlight, one eye closed forever, the other open, imperfect but full of life. Underneath it, I wrote by hand, "Absolutely worth saving." That night, he curled in my arms, his breathing steady, his small body pressed against my chest as if to prove he was no longer abandoned. I stroked behind his ear, whispering, "You saved yourself. And you saved me too, Shadow." In that moment, I felt Clara, my late wife, smiling somewhere, as if she knew we had just given each other a second chance. Tonight, as I hold Shadow close and listen to his even breathing, I have only one thing in my heart: gratitude. Gratitude that I reached him in time, gratitude that he chose to live, and gratitude that small moments can still save an entire life. Have you ever saved a dog before? If you have, I invite you to share your story in the comments. Let's spread love together, so no creature ever has to tremble in loneliness or be left behind again. And if Shadow's story touched your heart, I invite you to stay with me. Hit subscribe, so with every rescue to come, we can witness it together. Cry together, smile together, and believe together. There is no one, no dog, who is not worth saving. Thank you for staying with me until the very end, and thank you for believing in kindness.